Good evening, everyone. Let's bow in. So, welcome to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course. We're working our way through Volume 1 of the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. This is a compilation of talks. It's actually a digest. Trungpa Rinpoche, for a period of about 15 years, every year took away a group of students ranging from 150 to 250 plus for 3 months into a retreat. This is sort of redoing what he experienced himself as a young person in Tibet, when he would go into retreat with his teacher, Jamgon Kongtrul of Shechen. And in those retreats, they were 3 months long, and each month was devoted to a different division of the teachings. The Hinayana in the first month, so-called lesser, or as he preferred, foundational vehicle. The Mahayana in the second month, greater vehicle, and the Vajrayana or Tantrayana in the third month. And we are working our way now through volume 1 of these. A few years ago, Judy Leaf digested all those 15 years of talks into these 3 volumes. So these are kind of a compilation. And we are working our way through volume 1. And tonight we're on chapters 24 and 25. So, welcome. And Barry is going to lead off with chapter 24, talking about it, and then we'll discuss it. And I'll be doing chapter 25, and we'll discuss that. Barry.
Okay. Welcome. This chapter is the basic minimum, and I'm just going to read this first couple of sentences to start with. He says, in meditation practice, discipline is not how many hours you sit. It is your total involvement in the practice. In shamatha, mind, speech, or body, speech, and mind are completely and totally involved in the sitting practice. In vipassana, there is also involvement of the body, speech, mind. In addition, you're also completely aware of the environment around you. When you are involved so much that there is no longer an individual entity left to watch itself, that is shunyata, or emptiness level of practice. Wow. What he's just done here actually is kind of outlined the entire path of the Hinayana. That he says first of all, total involvement means that you practice with your mind and your body, and actually with total speech, mind, and body, to practice wholeheartedly and not just going through the motions. And I'll say a little more about body, speech, and mind a little later. But then when he says that when you are involved so much that there is no longer an individual entity to watch itself, that is shunyata, or emptiness level of practice. And what he's talking about here, this entity to watch itself, is what we've referred to here as the watcher. It's this little voice with all this commentary that keeps coming up, that whatever we experience, then there's commentary about it, and that we're always watching and criticizing ourselves. We say, look at that. I just realized I was thinking and came back, right? Am I doing this right? Am I not? Boy, I really want this. I want that. This is this ongoing commentary, and that at the Hinayana level especially, the practice is all about quieting the mind. And in doing that, we begin to quiet this watcher, and it becomes less and less relevant. It becomes more and more like background noise. So leaving the watcher behind is actually the fruition of the Hinayana path. This is individual liberation. That when that watcher is no longer there and we are simply fully present, we've been liberated. We don't have that there all the time. And this is referred to as the first bhumi, actually, at the entrance to the Mahayana. Now, at this point, of course, this is something to look forward to. But once again, he has really presented everything in a much broader range than you might expect. He brings the Vajrayana into it, and he's talking about liberation. So, body, speech, and mind. He says, where is it? Yeah. He says, I encourage you to have that approach of total involvement in your sitting practice and in meditation, in action, or everyday life. Commitment to the practice of meditation is a way of committing yourself to the teachings. And then, he says a little later, in meditation practice, what we are working on, working with, working at, is the mind. In Tibetan, known as Sem, in Sanskrit as Chitta. It is that which thinks and that which perceives thoughts. So, this is working with the mind that perceives and thinks about things that we are, as we are experiencing, that this is the watcher. And all of those thoughts can carry us away, including emotions. And all of this activity on this level, little thoughts, big thoughts, serious dreams, this is all an aspect of mind that in the Soto Zen tradition is referred to as little mind. And this little mind comes and goes. That something attracts our attention, we start thinking about it, and then something else comes along and that's gone. Little mind is coming and going all the time. Then there is big mind. And big mind is that which is always here, always aware of our senses, the six nobles, taste, touch, sound, all of that, and mental events. And that, the big mind never stops. It's always present. And it is this big mind that we come back to every time in meditation, that we realize that we're thinking and come back into the present moment, either to the breath or simply present awareness. It is that big mind that we come back to. And it is ever present. Clear, open, simple awareness. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I need to say something about body, speech, and mind, because I know that I experienced a little confusion about this, certainly. That, first of all, we're familiar with the body, with this idea of, coming back to the breath, coming back to our body in meditation, and of course the mind. Speech here, and John may correct me on this, but I think that speech here refers to emotional content, which is what propels us to, I don't know, to express or exhibit these things in the world. So in our practice, we are working with the body, speech, and mind in a way that bring them all together. That Trungpa elsewhere speaks of synchronizing body and mind. That if we take a deep breath and then let it out, breathing out tension, right? As we do this, we're synchronizing mind and body, at least for that moment. We are simply here experiencing the breath. That there are so many times that a sudden itch or pain or sneeze, in each of these moments, body and mind are together in the present. See, every time you become aware that you are thinking, that is another event, a moment, a kind of a spark where the body and mind are synchronized. These moments, these sparks happen all the time. And it is in meditation practice that we learn to recognize them and gradually relax. And these moments can grow and expand. Every time this happens, we are shifting from little mind to big mind, right? From samsara to nirvana. In each of those moments, we are liberated. So we go into, at this point, how do we do this? Work with the mind. That he says, rather than by tackling mind as an enemy or a friend, you work gently using the system developed by the Buddha, which is to let go and tighten up. You loosen or let go by means of the out-breath. You tighten up or concentrate by using the body. Working with posture is the means to release the tension and frustration that exists in your mind. And this is a little different presentation than the way he has talked previously, but bringing our awareness to the body moves us out of our thoughts. And it is these thoughts that always include tension, that include desire, fears, angst, dissatisfaction, restlessness, that things are not as they should be, and there is a kind of tension in all of that. Then loosen, relax, breathe out, and then when we come back to the body, there is a relaxation of that tension. You see, in the practice, we do this again and again. We may begin to experience the contrast between our personal dreamland, claustrophobic, unpleasant, frequently kind of nasty actually, and then the world of open awareness, which is fresh, vivid. Now he says something, another thing, which is important. It's all important. But he says in sitting meditation, you are dealing with body, speech, and mind simultaneously. You are developing a sense of precision and accuracy. There is no room, none whatsoever, for imagination or improvisation in sitting or in walking practice. Now, that can sound pretty severe. No room, none whatsoever for imagination or improvisation. And this may feel very unfair or limiting, but this actually frees us to deepen our practice. there's no strict enforcement here. You won't be tested. And of course, we all have to work with our own state of being, with this body, this mind as it is. As Pema says, start where you are. And we do our best with the posture, with the way we work with our mind gently, and make the accommodations that we need to and work with it. But the message here is avoid trying to create your own personal version of shamatha, to pick and choose elements of the practice. That while sitting, you may decide to deliberately think about things or try to work on a problem you have you need to solve, or just decide to give yourself over to some pleasurable fantasy. And you could say that there's no real harm in that, I guess, but it is not meditation. The real benefits come from letting go of that stuff. Any question you have about that, any need you may feel to do it my way, relax, follow the teachings. And for those of you who have taken the refuge vow, this is a good place to remember that you have committed yourself to the Dharma, to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Now he says, instead of classifying, and because he has talked in the reading about different styles and approaches to practice, and he says, instead of classifying the different styles of practice, I prefer to present very simply and directly what is necessary to do to begin sitting. And this is in the same vein there, that Hinayana is the yana of details and of precision and simply doing it. As he used to say, just do it, it works. He says, mindfulness is not looking at, thinking about, or imagining something better or higher than your natural breathing. You have a sense of breathing out. You breathe out, dissolve, and gap. And that way, openness and expansion take place constantly. You have heard this many times, and it works. Think of when you take a deep breath and let it out. You can feel the release of tension, of fixation. It is a letting go. You can let go of your preoccupations as you breathe out. Now, he, in a next section called Simplifying, he goes into great detail, and in the next chapter, on the breath, the posture, and all of this can be very helpful. It helps you to have, as he says, total involvement in the practice. And I encourage all of you to read through these things, possibly to return to it periodically, but don't get carried away. There's no requirement to remember in detail everything, all the points of posture and all that, and getting it just right. It is helpful to study and contemplate this material, just not while you're meditating. He says you should walk in, what it's talking about here is beginning your meditation and how to approach it. You should walk in and sit down properly on your meditation cushion. You should arrange yourself fully. Don't just plop. You should feel your cushion, make yourself as comfortable as you can. Don't rush into the technique. Settle down and adjust yourself. Now, keep in mind that that the situation in which he delivered this is one where it was, of course, an in-person gathering of meditators, and which is done a little differently than we do it here online. So several things he says here, just know that things are done a little differently. For instance, I don't know if any of you here have never been in a group meditation in person. I certainly encourage you to take the opportunity to do that. But when we meet in an in-person meeting, it begins with chants, and then the timekeeper, the person in front of the room, waits till everyone settles, and then rings the gong to announce the beginning of meditation. And so he speaks here of the gong rings, and as the sound fades, you begin. In our case here in these online sessions, of course, we have a leader who is actually leading us into the meditation by reminding us to bring our attention to the body, to relax, to adjust our posture, and go on from there. And one thing I'll mention about the chants, he talks about settling down, settling in, and the chants actually help us to do that. You know, they really are part of the practice. That as we chant, that helps us to make that transition. You know, we've set aside this time we're going to meditate, right? Where hopefully we're taking care of everything that may need to be done, but here we're going to sit. But there could be this residue, this tension and thoughts and stuff that you bring with you. So by beginning these sessions with chanting, it can really help to bring us into this space and quiet the mind, just as he describes in the reading, to sitting down, not just plopping, and adjusting yourself, taking some time, relaxing, and then, you know, bring yourself into the meditation. And finally, he ends by saying, to review, first you hear the gong, then you settle in, then you go out with the out breath, shoo, then you come back to your posture. So you have mind together with the earth, with the body as an overall reference point. And now, John. Oops. I have to. Oh, sorry, John.
It's okay. Thanks, Barry. This next chapter really is almost a repeat of the one we just did, but with emphasis on certain aspects. So it starts out by emphasizing the importance of an upright posture. He said, you have good head and shoulders, as if you were a great warrior, ready for anything. Quality of upliftedness, because mind and body are so interconnected that when you take this posture of upliftedness, it helps your mind to be uplifted as well and to come into the present with confidence. So you're aware of your back, your head and shoulders, your lower torso. Never slouch. You know, this is the oy vey posture. Oh, woe is me. He says a sense of who you are, clear breathing, easily. You can feel your head and shoulders. It becomes very powerful, fantastic. It's so simple. You're right here. Simplifying, relaxing, coming into erect, confident posture. He says being upright brings a sense of clear perception. The senses, the ayatanas, are clarified. The ayatanas are the eye and the object of vision, the ear and sound, the nose and smell, the taste, and the tongue and taste, the body and physical sensation, and the mind and mental events. These are the 12 ayatanas, they're called. And when we come present, these become much clearer. We see them much more simply and vividly. So he says the ayatanas are clarified because most are located in the upper part of your body, your eye, nose, ears, and mouth. And it helps the spine. He said it clarifies depression, which is said to come from the heart as well as from the 7th, 8th, and 9th vertebrae. How about that one? I've never heard that before. I got a terrible back. So maybe as we get older and our backs go bad, some of us, that has to do with depression, as well as from the shoulder sockets. Who knew that? With good posture, you develop your inner strength. You feel uplifted. You overcome drowsiness because you're awake. You have an awake posture. You overcome laziness, which is all about thinking about other things and wishing you were elsewhere. Overcome aggression because you're just here, upright, clear. And you overcome the desire to take time off, to escape from the Dharma. So we straighten our bodies, not in any kind of military sense. I went to military school one summer and we marched around and had military posture. That was when I was a kid. I was about 13, I think. But now our legs are crossed. Maybe you can do half lotus if you wish. Nobody should be doing full lotus unless you're really, 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 really unusually flexible. You can use a meditation bench. Let me see. I don't have one here. I guess it's downstairs. Sorry, but it's a little bench, and you put your leg, your from your feet to your knees, go under it, and you sit on it. And you can buy these. Full lotus, he says, unnecessary. You can use, if you need them, support cushions under the knees. And if your body hurts or is strained, adjust. You're not meant to be enduring pain. This isn't an exercise in self-torture, but not in any old bad posture, because it destroys balance and it affects your mind when you take a bad posture. Then your mind sort of conforms to that bad posture. You can use a meditation cushion. Yep. This is the one he loves. It's called a gamden, Tibetan. It's a hard sort of foam, and it's quite firm. And this is a gamden, literally means meditation seat. And you can use support cushions on top of it, like this. This is a support cushion that you can put on top if you wish. And then you can use, he recommended using a Japanese cushion underneath for your knees and your legs, called it's called a zabuton. And here it is. You can see it's quite a big pad. Some people prefer the Japanese style meditation cushion, which I use on my chair. This is a zafu. This particular one is filled with buckwheat, which I recommend. I like the buckwheat inside because it conforms to your body and doesn't get squashed as much. Now, I use this because it's fine to sit in a chair. As I've gotten older, after decades of sitting on a meditation cushion, my body won't do it anymore. I've got lymphedema in my right leg. I've had both hips replaced. It's what happens with old age for some of us. And so I have to sit in a chair, and that's fine for any kind of physical problems or because you're older and your body won't conform. And when you sit in a chair, probably the main instruction is try not to use the back of the chair to support your back. You want to sit in a way that your back is erect, easily erect, without effort. And one of the best ways of doing that is to take a cushion like this zafu that I just showed you here, and you scrunch it up a little bit underneath you so that it tilts your pelvis forward. This is what I'm doing right now. And at the moment, I am sitting on this chair without using the back of it, on this zafu, and my back is effortlessly straight because the zafu is sort of curving my pelvis forward and helping me to straighten my spine without effort. So that's all recommended. He says, if your body hurts or is strained, adjust. This isn't a self-torture exercise. So you move. So for instance, perhaps you're sitting cross-legged or in half lotus on a cushion, and your foot goes to sleep. Change them up. Perhaps your knee starts to hurt. Bring your knee up. Don't make a commotion out of it, but just do it in such a way that it relieves the pain and allows, and then you can go back. As I say, it's common sense. We have a common sense approach to our body and its pains and what it can and can't do. Yes, let's see. He says, relate with the floor, the earth, and feel the space around your body. He said this over and over again, that we want to feel as though we're planted on the earth, very solid, and that you can feel the space around you as well. He says, by sitting upright, you are proclaiming to yourself and the rest of the world that you are going to become a Buddha and awake one day, or be awake one day. So you hold your seat, you don't hang your head like this. That's sad and complainatory. You don't bend anything. You keep an upright posture. Your shoulders are straight naturally. Your energy goes up and your head and shoulders are automatically good. He says, bad posture distracts you, destroys the natural flow of the breath. Your breath comes very easily with a good posture, naturally. He says, don't perch on your cushion. That means, feeling like you're sort of, ready for some kind of an attack. And slouching is unnecessary. We've said that again. It's giving into neurosis. Slouching, he calls it setting sun, using a Shambhala term. It's sad, it's complainatory, it's not celebratory of life. And he says, your posture is the saving grace in synchronizing mind and body, because that's what we're doing. Right now, as you sit here, take a good posture. Maybe look over the top of your computer screen. See, when you're in a group, you look down at about a 45-degree angle. But there's another teacher that we used to study with when we were at the Westchester Buddhist Center. His name is Organ Chowan. He says you can direct your gaze anywhere you like, off to an angle or whatever. Just hold it steady, because the eyes and the mind are so interconnected that if your eyes are moving, your thoughts probably are too, and vice versa. When your thoughts move, your eyes will be shifting around. So when we sit and we're looking at a computer screen, I personally keep my eyes at the horizontal. I'm looking out over the top of my screen to the trees outside. Your gaze is relaxed, natural. You're right here, right now. Let's do this together. You don't have to have any thoughts. The awareness is just here in the room. Spatial. Includes anything and everything that might present itself to you through the senses and through your mind. And you just relax here in this space. That's the beauty of meditation. It's really all about relaxation. It's not about some kind of very exhausting effort at all. Quite the reverse. Especially at the very highest levels of meditation, approaching enlightenment itself. It's completely effortless. You're just effortlessly here, right now, in this space. Together with me, you can hear this voice, your bottom on your seat, whatever your seat happens to be, feeling of your feet resting on whatever they're resting on, perhaps the floor, a cushion, who knows. So it's really coming back to awareness. Awareness of what? Now, this present moment. Um, oh, this is an interesting one. I don't do this, but I think I'm going to be doing it for a while. He says, the tip of the tongue. I've done this many times, but I haven't been doing it lately. You put the tip of the tongue behind your teeth, and you keep your lips slightly parted, and you can breathe through your nostrils. He says you can breathe through your nostrils and your mouth. Personally, I just breathe through my nostrils. It's completely up to you. But the tip of the tongue is behind the teeth with the the lips slightly parted. And if you see a picture of the Buddha or a statue, you'll see that his lips are slightly parted, usually. Your eyes are cast slightly down, if you're sitting in a group especially. We used to say at a 45-degree angle, but they're not closed because we're doing Vipassana, which contains shamatha, that is awareness practice, which contains mindfulness. So like that. This isn't mystical or magical, he says. The idea is to be a complete human being, not a dudro. Dudro is the word for animal. Dudro means walks on all fours, as opposed to a human being that walks upright. And we start with posture to imitate the Buddha. Cushion between the knees, you're kneeling and you put a cushion between your knees and sit on that. That's not good. He doesn't like that. Gamden is best, although you can use a zafu or a meditation bench, which is a kind of kneeling. You kneel with your legs on the knees and your shins on the floor and your feet under you, and you're sitting on this bench, and that's okay too. So, general guidelines, you have a sense of space. Don't feel cramped. You have room to expand all around you. Some room above your head is helpful. Let go and breathe out and relax. Not by slouching, but by being present here. Out breath, let go. Here we are, relaxed. You relax the gaze. You are here properly, fully and present with your eyes open. In Shambhala training, we go through stages, levels 1 through 5, of raising the gaze to the horizontal and of taking your awareness and going out with the breath into space. So you can do that as well. You can start with your gaze lower, and you can gradually, in whatever time periods you like, raise it to the horizontal. Shambhala training style. And as I said, Urgen Chowan, who's a Nyingma teacher, says you can look anywhere. The hands can be, as we say every morning, in the begging bowl mudra. The begging bowl mudra looks like this. You just almost touch the thumbs, and actually your right hand is over your left, although it doesn't matter a lot. You can do it either way. And you put it in your lap. That's the begging bowl. Sometimes it's called the cosmic mudra. And oftentimes you see the Buddha or a Buddha with their hands in that mudra. But Trungpa Rinpoche preferred what's called the relaxing the mind mudra, which is simply the one that we do every morning. Palms down on your thighs, your elbows by your sides. It's called relaxing the mind. He says it's more royal and more tantric. And it's also called the double earth witnessing mudra. I never knew that. until I reread this chapter. What is most important with either mudra is a sense of unity and balance. So we breathe out through the nose, he says, and the mouth. I find that difficult, so I just do it through the nose. You can choose. You can also just breathe out through the mouth. But then what will probably happen is that your mouth will become dry. He says, opening the mouth a little as if saying, ah. You take your seat, you project out. You're trying to mimic or emulate the Buddha. So have a sense of openness and uprightness. You should feel that you're projecting out as if you were the universal monarch, the enlightened one, ready for this world. You could listen to Dharma talks this way too. It's very good. Keeps your mind open and awake. And he says each session of meditation should begin in the same way, by checking your posture, and after walking meditation too. Check your body, shoulders, head, neck, back, hands on your knees. You're sitting on the earth, and that's very important. The Buddha sitting on the earth, and there's a famous mudra of the Buddha. He was asked, how could he know or prove that he was enlightened? And he said that the earth is my witness. And he reached down and touched the earth. And he was sitting cross-legged on it. Touched it with his hand, put his hand down like that. So we can have a discussion. There's a lot of talk about posture. Posture is so helpful.
I have a question.
Hi, Paul.
So when the Buddha did that, when he reached down and touched the earth as it's his witness, I don't understand that.
You don't understand it.
No, I don't know the meaning of that. How does that signify that the earth was his witness?
By touching it. He was saying, the earth is my witness. It's a way of sort of acknowledging the earth and his connection to it and his solidity and his presence, in now. He's relaxed, he's here, he's on the earth, he's present. The earth is his witness to this.
Sort of like grounding. Okay.
Yeah.
And he was grounded. He was sitting there.
Yes. And that's what we're doing. The same thing. We're taking the earth as our witness by grounding ourselves on it.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for the great question.
Mary.
Hi. Obviously you can talk about this later because it's more about like on page 188, it's towards the very end of the page. It's talking about different approaches to meditation, different traditions. And Zen tradition, Soto Zen tradition, and then I don't know, like I know if you would you mind just talking about those different traditions, or how is it like it says Zen tradition practices Hinayana Buddhism in the light of Mahayana inspiration. In Tibetan we practice in the light of Vajrayana, but then it says Kagyu lineage of Buddhism, which is ours, is surprisingly close to the Theravada school of, I don't know what that is, so I would like to know if we have time for that, or if it's actually easy.
So what happened is that after the Buddha died, the Sangha fractured. The same kind of thing is happening to us today after Trungpa Rinpoche died, right? And then there was this whole division between the regent and his followers and everybody else, and there was a split. And then the Sakyong, it's split again. Well, that happened after the Buddha died. And the period for a few hundred years after he died is referred to now, in retrospect, as the period of the 18 schools.
Mm-hmm.
Most of those schools, with their particular slants, died out. A few of them did not. One of them, in particular, was called the Doctrine of the Elders, the people who held to the doctrine of the elders. Elder in Sanskrit is Stavira, and doctrine is Vada. This school migrated across the ocean to Ceylon and appeared there. And in Ceylonese, Stavira Vada, the doctrine of the elders, becomes Theravada in Ceylonese, you see? So this was the doctrine of the elders. And then it spread throughout Southeast Asia as Theravada, and it's called Theravada today. This is the so-called, and then what also happened in India during this period of the 18 schools, one particular school was called the Greater Sangha, the Maha Sanghikas, those who would adhere to a greater Sangha. That school migrated east around the time of Christ to China, where it became the Mahayana. The Mahasanghika became Mahayana. And the Mahayana left, it had a difficult transition into China. I think mostly because of the language difficulty. Chinese is utterly different than Sanskrit. They're at opposite ends of the linguistic spectrum, the two languages. They're very, very different. Very hard to translate Sanskrit into Chinese. Sanskrit is highly inflected, very precise, multiple meanings for very precise meanings for different words. And the grammar is ultimately complex and precise. Chinese, on the other hand, is almost ungrammatical. In fact, literary Chinese, when I first started studying literary Chinese, I was in college. The first thing that our teacher gave us to read was an essay on Chinese grammar. It was called, there was a famous Chinese scholar named Mencius who lived in about the 4th century BC. And this essay was by a famous linguist, and it was called An Abortive Grammar of Mencius, meaning he couldn't do one. It's just ungrammatical. And so, it had a lot of difficulty, but around in the 4th century, around 400, a great translator went to China named Kumarajiva, and he managed to actually get it right. Before then, the Chinese were getting lots of things wrong. And what developed in China was Mahayana Buddhism. They called it initially Chan Buddhism. Chan means meditation Buddhism. And it went from there to a number of places. In the 7th century, it went to Japan, where it became Zen. Zen is the word that translates Chan and means meditation, Zen Buddhism. It went north to Korea, and it also went to Mongolia, as well as from Tibet it went to Mongolia. In the 8th century, what happened meanwhile was in India. Why am I telling you all this? In India, we had Mahayana Buddhism that developed, and then in the first 6 or 7 centuries AD, CE, Tantrism appeared. And Tantrism was the co-option of Hindu Tantra by Buddhists. And that eventually made its way into legitimate Buddhism and was transmitted to, among other places, especially Tibet. A little bit of it went to China, very little bit went to Japan, almost nothing went to Korea. It went to Mongolia via Tibet, but in Tibet, the whole tantric body went from India, along with the Mahayana and the Hinayana. The Hinayana was called by the Tibetans, it was called the Hinayana, means lesser vehicle. Trungpa Rinpoche preferred foundational vehicle. The Mahayana, as we said, includes things like Zen, Chan, Buddhism, meditation Buddhism, and the Vajrayana is tantric. And that went to Tibet, all of it, the whole kit and caboodle, starting in supposedly 620 or so AD. And then it didn't really catch on there until 750 AD, when a great Tibetan king named Trisong Detsen became a devoted Buddhist. He was converted by one of his 18 wives. And he imported people from India. First, he promoted a teacher named Shantarakshita, who was a great teacher, but he couldn't handle the Tibetans. And he told Trisong Detsen, you need somebody more powerful. And there's this guy in India named Padmasambhava. Send for him. And he did. And Padmasambhava came, and other Indian teacher, another Indian teacher named Vikramashila was very important. But Padmasambhava is generally regarded by Tibetans as sort of the Buddha of their culture. In fact, many Tibetans regard Padmasambhava as more important than the Buddha himself. So I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah.
It's a very,
Yes.
and then Buddhism, at the time of the communist invasion of China, takeover of China, 1949, Buddhism was the most populous religion in the world. There were more Buddhists than there were adherents of any other religion. It's probably pretty much that way today, too, because when the communists banned it, it just went underground. And now it's coming back big time.
I was more like wondering if, because the paragraph starts with sitting practice of meditation, like I was wondering if the practice, how we've been talking about the posture, like your head, this posture, you're sitting upright, you're focusing on this, you can just cosmic meditation pose or not, your tongue, can be behind your teeth. So we're talking about very specific details. I'm wondering if these different traditions, like what do they look like if not focusing on, do they not focus on breathing? What do they do?
They all focused on breathing, but they're different styles.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you go to a Soto Zen sesshin, that's a month-long sitting practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
You will sit facing a wall, and you will be by yourself. And if you fall asleep, there's a person who walks the hall, by all the cushions. And when he spots somebody who's fallen asleep, he might whack you with a stick. Now, the Tibetans, they're the completely other side of the spectrum. I mean, they'll sit there and pick their nose, fart, and they don't give a shit. They just, they're relaxed. It's just a different, each culture has its own particular style.
Okay.
I'm not very familiar with the Chinese style. I used to sit in a Japanese zendo, and it's very, very strict. You sit really erect, and if you fall asleep, you can get whacked.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Just different styles, cultural styles. But basically, the basic meditation that's being described here is common to all traditions. It's just the sort of the style of posture. And so, for instance, in the Tibetans had no version of sesshin. Sesshin is a month-long sitting practice. You sit all day, every day. You take your meals in a meditative ritual called oryoki, where everybody walks in and the whole thing is choreographed to the nth degree. I mean, it's just amazing, the detail in oryoki. And they walk in, they bring the food, they bow, they come to your place, you bow, you have this set of utensils that are wrapped in a cloth, and you unwrap them in a very particular way and laid them out. You hold up your bowl in a very particular way. The guy plops the food in, you bow, he walks on to the next person. I mean, oryoki is very, very ritualized. There's no equivalent of that in Zen. And there was no sesshin in Tibetan Buddhism. They didn't practice this. Excuse me, I didn't mean in Zen. I meant in Tibetan. There's no equivalent of oryoki in Tibetan because they didn't practice group sitting. They didn't do group sitting like we're doing now. They and Rinpoche went to Tassajara and saw them sitting sesshin with Suzuki Roshi, loved it, and he created Datun. Datun is a month-long sitting practice, but he made changes. One thing he didn't change is oryoki. He loved oryoki, and we all had to do oryoki. At first, I hated it. I got to love it, but I hated it at first. I remember I was leading a Datun once, and a guy raises his hand during a Q&A, and he says, oryoki. I said, yes. And he says, duck, duck, goose. You know what duck, duck, goose is? It's like musical chairs. It's a game that kids play, where the kids run around and they have to get to the chair. That's what he felt like oryoki was like. But we did that. We adopted the sesshin style. And also, another thing that Rinpoche didn't like about the Japanese form sesshin was the constant, the sameness of the length of the meditation and the walking. You walk for 40, you sit for 40, you walk for 10, you sit for 40, you walk for 10. He hated that. He thought it would make his students into clock watchers. So when we did sesshin initially, oh my God, it was crazy. Sometimes you'd sit for an hour and a half and walk for 5 minutes. Sometimes you'd walk for 30 and sit for 10. He had it all over the map. But now it's gotten sort of more regularized. So anyhow.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's all a matter of forms, different cultural forms and styles.
So, Frederick.
Yeah, I didn't know that the first time reading this about the shoulders and depression. That's very interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Because, especially I notice, I sit and like my shoulder clicks, and I'm sure other people get tension too, maybe if not in the shoulders, the back or other places. What's the instruction of how to, I know they say to release it through the out breath, right? Is there anything more to add to that?
Move if you have to, twist around, do whatever it takes. You don't torture yourself now, but you don't indulge yourself either. So sometimes you might find that your leg is hurting you and you're going to draw it up, you pull up your knee into your chest. You might sit through it and see if it goes away, if it was just kind of a mental creation, the pain. On the other hand, this isn't an exercise in physical torture. So you don't, hurt yourself. So it's a matter of judgment and experimentation. Thank you. Good questions. But isn't it beautiful, this emphasis on how posture can help your mind come present, clear, simple. Mind and body are so interconnected.
Mika, I think, had something. You need to unmute yourself, though.
There we go. So I have a little bit of confusion about the gap. So my understanding is that you breathe out and you let yourself follow the breath and dissolve. And before the in-breath happens, there's a little space. And in that space is like your best, I don't know what the word is, opportunity to experience no thought or degree of emptiness, or where you just are and you're not thinking because you've just expelled your breath and the in-breath hasn't happened and there's this little gap. But then I felt that he was also referring to the whole in-breath as a gap, because You're not following your breath, you're just automatically breathing in. Or is it, which I also thought, that when the in-breath is over, there's a gap? In other words, you breathe out,
What?
there's a little, that you breathe out, there's a little space. You automatically breathe in. And then before you breathe out again, there's also a little space. There's a moment or two there when nothing is happening. You don't even have a moment to think of anything because you just breathe in, gap, breathe out, gap, breathe in. Or is the gap referring to the whole breathing in process? So I'm just a little confused about it. I thought I'd bring it up.
I'd ask Barry to answer it, but you two are too close.
Was I clear about my question?
Yes, you are. It's simply that what he's saying is that your meditation is the out breath, going out with it. Everything else, just relax and forget it. The in breath, and then the out breath goes. You go out with the breath. You go out with the breath. You go out with the breath. See, there's no, I'm not saying, then you come in. You don't even bother to say that. It's just out breath. Dissolve here.
Well,
that's it.
You
And
don't say it, but you experience it. I mean, there is the physical activity you experience is breathing out,
if you're noting,
yeah.
If you're noting it, then it's not a gap. Then you're making it into a thing. You're saying, there's the gap, and you've labeled it. Just relax. Out breath, dissolve. Here we are. Out breath, dissolve. Here we are. In the gap, you might call it, is almost unnoticeable. You don't pay attention to it. It just happens. Like the silence between these words.
Okay, but it's referred to so often when I'm reading about it. They always seem to be talking about the gap as if it's like a particular focal point. So it's hard to not regard it as a focal point.
It's just that you're dissolving. You're dissolving that sense of I and effort. The breath goes out, dissolves, it's gone. And I is gone with it. You don't think about that, but that's what happens. The attention is on the breath, goes out, dissolves. Here we are. So letting go. You're letting go into space. I mean, right now, you're not thinking. You're just here with me, listening to these words. For that instant, that's it. That's gap. Could call it. Yeah, there you go. You were thinking hard. That wasn't the gap. Your eyes went up like this, You see, we do. That's the way we do it. All of us. The gaps are happening all the time. It's how we can be aware of our world. We come back from dream, and here we are. What do you think, Philip?
So I sympathize with Micah's confusion because in the text, it is presented both ways, as if it's just the moment between the in-breath and the out-breath, and also as if it's the entire in-breath. So that is confusing. But I also think Micah's on the right track in that the gap is referred to over and over again. And some teachers would say that it is our first glimpse of shunyata, or emptiness, or even enlightenment, whatever word you want to use, that reality behind beyond our thoughts and our conceptions. You can glimpse it in that gap. That's the same thing. It is of the same nature. And they also say that our thoughts, which seem to us to be unending and continuous, are in fact not. They're discrete. And then there's a gap, and then there's another thought, and then there's a gap, and there's another thought. And those gaps, it's the same thing. It's of the nature of emptiness. So you're right to pay attention to that concept. I think that's a really important concept. That would be my contribution.
Thank you.
Wanted to say something? Oh, Frederick, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems like I'm so glad Micah asked that question. 'Cause I find that it's probably like the most profound thing here, and you say it every day, so it's got to be important. With that gap and that in breath, it seems to be like we're trying to learn how to trust. Because I notice sometimes like, and what are we trying to trust? We're trying to trust life, I guess, that, I don't have to put any effort into breathing. It's just going to allow for it to happen. But I noticed like there's so much resistance there. And even, after I read this chapter again, I'm meditating this morning and I'm feeling just like suffering. I'm like, wow, each in breath, it's like, heaviness of existence or something. I'm not sure what to make of that, but that was my experience.
You just do it
Don't have a choice, right?
and relax. That's the way to get to the gap.
That's really the main thing, is relax. And don't sweat the details. It's as I was saying during the reading, that it's useful to study this stuff to improve your understanding, but don't get too hung up on it. Really, it really comes down to this very simple instruction. Relax. When thoughts arise, return your attention to the breath or to open awareness. That's it.
Barry quoted Trungpa Rinpoche earlier saying, just do it. It works. It really does. Getting it. Yes,
Can I
Mary.
say something? I mean, like from a very physical, point of view, when we breathe in, our heartbeat rises. And in the book, it also says that the body tightens, like, you get the focus over there. But as you exhale, literally, body actually relaxes. It's more like from a nervous system point of view, you look at it from a more of a calming effect of it already. So I always just took it as I exhale, yeah, I can physically feel my body's melting, almost like kind of that tightness leaves my body. So yeah, and then yeah, whatever. Okay, thank you.
That's good. That's really good. Thank you. I mean, it brings up this point that if you are watching the breath go in and out, when you breathe in, it affirms self. When you breathe out, it's a giving out of self, which is another reason we work with the out breath and we don't pay any attention to the in breath. In shamatha, you do pay attention to the in breath. There's very much a sense of effort. But that effort is utterly relaxed in vipassana.
Yeah.
And we just go out, dissolve.
And in the chapter, he talks about how the Buddha's method had to do with tightening and loosening. And that has to do with the in-breath and the out-breath. Tightening, loosening. And well, we have 15 minutes left, but I'm wondering if anyone else would like to say something or have a question or criticism or anything, maybe?
Philip has something.
Well, sure. If no one else has anything, I wanted to bring us back to page 191. And it sort of is a change in tone, which I think is really important. So this section called Take Your Time, the end of the second paragraph in that section, the last couple of sentences, he says, when you sit down, first settle nicely on your cushion and treat yourself well. Give yourself a good time. So posture is important, and all these points are important, but this part of it is critically important. Meditation is the most important thing you'll ever learn. It's the most precious gift you can give to yourself. So when you sit down next time, settle yourself nicely on your cushion and treat yourself well. Give yourself a good time.
You can have some chocolates by your cushion. Joke, sorry. You could.
Glass of wine,
You know,
Yes,
and
Mika?
it's such a conundrum because, I mean, it's what I deal with a lot. Because I meditate intermittently depending on what's going on in my life. And sometimes my life has been, for different reasons, pretty confusing and hectic. And so then sometimes I make a determination to meditate. Okay, so despite what's going on, I'm going to sit down and meditate. So I do it. I meditate, and sometimes it's a meditation that's relaxing, and sometimes it's a meditation that isn't so relaxing. But what I deal with, for better or for worse, and this is the confusing part, what I deal with is the fact that, well, after I meditate, some part of me always says, well, at least you did something good today, which is the antithesis of what I'm supposed to be trying to do, or what the goal is. No, you can't even use goal, of what the overall context is of meditation. I'm not supposed to be saying, oh, I did something good today, because that's the antithesis of the whole point of meditating. So it is a bit of a conundrum, and it's sort of hard to escape. Because even though we're trying to escape, I don't want to get into this, I know it's the end. Even though we're trying to escape the ego, it's always with us.
Yes, but
It's always a commentary.
It's even worse ego to say, oh, I'm a terrible person for saying that. You know? That's even more.
You can go on forever.
Huh?
You can go on forever.
Yeah.
I'm a terrible person for saying that. No, I'm not supposed to say I'm terrible. Oh, I'm even more terrible.
Think about this. Think about this. From the essence of ego is self-attack. Ego, to congratulate yourself, is almost anti-ego. But to attack yourself, that's definitely powerful ego. Then you're saying, I'm thus screwed up and I really want to get much, much better. And, yeah. So, this guy behind me on the wall, you can't see him, I guess. No. He's Dorje Trollo. And his job, he's a wrathful deity. He's Padmasambhava in his wrathful form. And his main job is to kill self-attack, to slaughter it. It takes its form as a spirit called the Gyalgan, which is the spirit of self-attack. And Dorje Trollo's job, his name is Indestructible Wrathful One, Dorje Trollo. His main job is to butcher the Gyalgan, to butcher self-attack, because it is the number one ego. Number one evil. So if you are congratulating yourself on becoming aware, I would say that's terrific, especially for you. For another person, it might be a problem. Not for you, though.
Yeah, that almost sounds like Maitri, or the beginnings of Maitri. You're starting to befriend yourself.
Yeah.
Well, that
I
would be
agree.
good.
Well, Miriam has something.
I think, Mika, I think it would be such a great thing if you started congratulating yourself on awareness. I'm rooting for that.
Me too.
Me too. Me too. Here. Mika and Merrick, did you have a comment?
Miriam.
No. Miriam.
Yes, hi. I think we're getting back to what Barry was talking about the beginning of chapter 24, which was, I think, really beautiful in summarizing the whole point of meditation. And, when you're absorbed in the practice, your attention is absorbed and is immersed in the now, to the point where he says here there's no longer an individual entity left to watch itself. So there's nothing left to condemn or compliment, or that becomes it's out of the picture, and this is where the relief is. And I think it's for that purpose that you should be motivated to continue, and also that you could say, oh, I did something good. I mean, because that is the only time when you get a break from existence, really, especially if you have a critic inside your head. So to have that watcher gone, and or at least momentarily, and to experience awareness without that, it seems to be the gem in the whole practice. So that's liberation, as Barry said. But it comes back. Watcher does come back, always. The little mind comes back. But, then you can contextualize it and not suffer so much.
And you can just watch it, see it. And then as soon as you see it, you're no longer caught in the dream.
You can watch the watcher.
And then it goes away.
And by the way, it is possible for the watcher to go away.
That's Merrick.
Say something. I mean, going back to what Micah said, I had a similar feeling just today, actually, because I've been volunteering at a food shelter for a while now, and today I had that thought, like, you're doing this whole selfless activity, and then I'm talking to myself, and then I said, so, but I'm feeling amazing, and then I'm just, good job, like in my mind, of course. But then I say, so how is it selfless? I mean, I'm feeling so good about myself. So it's just, yeah, I mean, selfless. Yeah, but I also like take those like selfless activities as like pure, still like pure joyful, and there's nothing wrong with feeling that joy. And I think after they become part of your habitual life, then I think you just also stop patting your back, because it's just almost like part of who you are. I'm not there yet. I'm still like kind of good job part. But I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I have dealt with really like kind of that. I still am every day, like those self-critic, very hard on myself, like when something happens the way it shouldn't. I just am pretty hard on myself, and it's a lifelong process of just shutting that voice down.
Exactly. Yes.
But also like I took a class from Kristen Neff about mindful self-compassion. And one thing that I learned over there is, almost like befriending that ego, and just understanding as just, seeing it as the way it is. There is nothing good or bad about that. You just have to see that. And when that critic starts talking to you in a kind of learn to, in a way, practice just talking back at that voice. And I just, hey, I know you're worried about me. I know the way you talk to me is just also to protect me. You just want to punch me first before I get punched outside. I know, but I just need you to be a little bit quiet now. Kind of that way of self, I don't know, like soothing conversations. But yeah.
It sounds
Or
like,
and
it
just
sounds
watch the
like
process.
it sounds like compassion to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that those are the practices I just had to learn to really start talking to myself a little bit better.
Don't we all?
It's tough.
Yeah, we're so hard on ourselves.
Does anybody else have something to say that hasn't spoken up yet? Judith? Yeah, Judith.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm very grateful for Micah's question and all the discussion that followed. It I don't know why I never asked that question because I've always had it. So it's great that to have input on that. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I wanted to add what Merrick said about the neurology of the breath. And the nervous system is divided into the autonomic nervous system by the sympathetic and parasympathetic. And the parasympathetic calming and the sympathetic speeds up. And when you breathe out, it's part of the parasympathetic, and that's why it's calming. Additionally, when we sit upright, we're calling on the brain to be more active to control our posture. I'm a retired chiropractor. So when we're sitting up, we're calling on our spine. The nerves in the spine are activated, and it calls on the brain to stay awake to keep us erect. So there's a lot of neurology involved. And just one other thing I wanted to say was that regarding the breath, the in and the out and the pause or the gap, I liken that to like the tides of the breath. The in and the out is like this constant battle of life that we have, or I have at least. The good, the bad, the dualism. And that moment of in between is sort of like my last breath. When I dissolve into the oneness, and then it's just oneness. It's no duality of in or out, up or down, hot or cold. It's that moment at the out breath that it just seems to me like that. That's what it means to me. That's what it feels like. That peace that's there in that gap is the end of the fight.
That's terrific. Thank you. Really great. Thank you. I see Fred nodding.
Yeah. That you found the words for what something, I'm understanding this experience a bit more, like the resistance, because like the in-breath, yeah, it's like that tension, and I'm like, no, I'm trying to avoid that, but it's like, no, this is part of it, and I got to be a little bit, work on relaxing and accepting that, I can't do much about it, so why fight against the tide, so to speak. Thank you.
Don, and then I think we're out of time.
Yeah, just to comment, I don't know a lot about it. I'm finishing this book by Pema Chodron called How You Live is How You Die. And so near the end of the book, she's getting, the whole book talks about the Bardos, and that may be maybe not relevant to this class, but that the whole discussion about the gap and what was just talked about, where there isn't this duality, it seems like it resonates with one of those Bardo states. I don't know, but maybe I'm just concocting that because I don't understand the Bardos enough. The other thing that comes to mind is he talks about the first, or there's a reference made to the first bhumi. And is that like getting a glimpse of the first bhumi when you're in that gap and you're completely dissolved? Is that Shanyatar, the first bhumi?
Could be.
It could be. It could be. It could. The first movie, which is called Great Joy, and it's great joy because you've been relieved of this, insistent, ever-present watcher and ego and stuff. And it in the teachings, it comes when you actually understand that this idea, this self, this me, this person really is just a mental construct, has no real substance. And at that point, when your understanding goes beyond intellectual, that when you've read this and you've contemplated it, and then through meditation start to begin to have a real experience of this, that is when the first movie happens.
We should end. Barry, can you put the chants up, the closing chants?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Give me a moment to find them, but I can.
Wonderful discussion.
Yes.
I'm going to find, I hope I can find it, this passage where a man named Chungling Rinpoche, he's discussing, you see, the sadhana of Mahamudra, and he talks about the Gelgon, the spirit of self-attack, and he talks about Dorje Trollo. And I'd like to find that passage and give it to you.
Yes,
So we'll
please.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a second. Oh, should I do it?
You want to do it? Sure.
Yeah, I can do it. Or you can.
Okay, great.
Here we go. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all of the maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Everyone.
much.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Everybody,
Hasta mañana.
hasta mañana.
Yeah.